What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHox42 on the internet. And today I want to talk about one of the Doctor Who cards that is going to be coming in an upcoming Universes Beyond product. There will be a number of Doctor Who commander decks. And in addition to the pre-con commander decks, they're actually going to be selling the cards, like the new unique cards that are included within the commander decks in booster packs, which honestly, it's funny because on the one hand, I look at it and I just ask, well, why? Like pre-con decks in the past never had boosters. So why is that a thing now? But then I look back on it and I ask myself kind of, okay, the Warhammer 40k decks, for example, I didn't purchase the 40k decks, but if I could have spent $6, $7, $8, whatever they're going for, and pick up a booster pack of Warhammer cards, I might have done that. Like, that actually does sound kind of enticing and interesting. And so the fact that they're doing that with Doctor Who, I'm not mad at it. But anyway, that's not what we're here to discuss today. What I really want to get into is the 10th Doctor. This is the first Doctor that they've spoiled. We know that there will be a couple of other ones as like face cards on some of the other products. We also know there are cards that reference Time Lords as a creature type. So presumably we'll have a number of Time Lords, not only the Doctor, but also, versions of the Master and whatnot. No doubt those are going to be here. So that's cool. That's exciting stuff. Fans of the show, rejoice. I'm a pretty casual fan of the show, but I did watch all of David Tennant's run, the 10th Doctor. So let's get into the card. It is a 3/5 for 3 blue-red. Legendary creature, Time Lord Doctor. And there are 2 like flavor keywords on the text box. The first is allons-y. Whenever you attack, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. Put 3 time counters on it. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. And then there's also the ability timey-wimey. You can pay 7, time travel 3 times, activate only as a sorcery. Now, time traveling, when you time travel, for some reason, that's a new keyword that we now, or a new like mechanic that we now have. When you time travel, you can activate it. So in this case, you only activate a sorcery. For each suspended card you own and each permanent control with a time counter on it, you may add or remove a time counter. Then do it 2 more times. This card is basically if Atali and Joyra kind of squished together and became one card. This is it. Like Joyra of the Get To cares about suspend cards and can suspend stuff for you and allow you to effectively be free casting your things. That's what the 10th Doctor's doing, and is doing it, based on attacks off the top of your library. So, all right. It's an interesting design, but it's not necessarily anything new. We have the time travel thing, which is now interesting. Honestly, if anything, this card could easily fit into one of those Joyra-style suspend decks. That come to think of it, I know I personally haven't seen it in a long time, which is kind of... That's interesting, now that I think about it, because I suspect that deck is nowhere near as strong as it used to be. And I have a feeling that, honestly, this card, if you're a fan of the show, obviously it's Commander, right? This is meant for Commander. And as a result, if you like the 10th Doctor, if you want David Tennant to be your commander, you can do some cool things with this and you can have a fun, dynamic gameplay experience. Go nuts, enjoy. The reality is, though, I feel like it's awfully expensive for what you get. So it's a 3/5 for 5. Also, the flavor of the 10th Doctor being Izzet, I'm kind of cool with, because he's kind of an erratic genius, So the notion of somebody who has kind of this mad scientist energy, who's completely brilliant and can't be presented with a problem, he can't find some goofy way to solve, it feels appropriate for Izzet. So honestly, just quick gut check. I like that. But the effect is just too expensive. Like the time travel costing 7 is really expensive. Being able to remove 3 suspend counters, or 3 time counters rather, from all your suspended cards, like that's not bad. But you got to be all in on suspend. So that's really what it comes down to. Can you build an Izzet deck that is all in on suspend that is decent? With the current suspend cards out there, you have some options. But when I think of like really busted, or at least like suspend cards that really, I don't know, really make a splash, I think of things like Crashing Footfalls in Modern, or I think of like Profane Tutor, and those just aren't in these colors. I know that there are other options out there. I'm sure there are plenty of things you can do with this, but I don't know. I'm not necessarily sold on this guy, or at the very least, he doesn't get me excited. But again, It's made for Commander. If it gets you excited, well, go have some fun. It's going to be interesting. I think as far as a depiction of the character goes, this fits. I love the fact that they put the flavor keywords. I think that's something that they should do more often in general, because whenever Wizards is trying to like create a flavorful card, do one of these top-down designs, the mechanics are clearly designed to depict elements of those characters or elements of that setting, right? And the fact that they can now just put the flavor keyword there to just kind of like hint, like, this is what we were thinking about. So yeah, allons-y. That's what the Doctor always said whenever they would go off and do something. Oftentimes right before hitting the throttle on the TARDIS, right? Like, cool. So whenever you attack, you get to do things. And that's when the stuff happens. All right, great. And then timey-wimey was something that, honestly, like, I find it interesting that is tied to the 10th Doctor. Because if I'm remembering correctly, I believe it was Chris Eccleston, the 9th Doctor, who actually coined the phrase. And David Tennant definitely picked up right where Chris Eccleston left off, because he was only there for one season. Like, the 9th Doctor was actually a very, very tiny blip in the greater Doctor Who universe. And so I feel like the 10th Doctor was put in this position where it's like, okay, the franchise has just been rebooted. A bunch of people are interested, and our main dude is gone. So, I don't know, man. You pick it up and do what you got to do. And honestly, I think David Tennant did a phenomenal job. And honestly, I think he's one of the reasons that Doctor Who is still relevant today, because there were many years where he put on a killer show and really carried a lot of momentum. So, David Tennant, if for some crazy reason you're watching this, thank you for doing what you do and absolutely crushing it. And also just being an awesome working actor. I also find it funny, I heard him in an interview one time comment that he's a Scottish actor playing a British alien with a French catchphrase, which is all true and freaking weird when you really stop and think about it. But at the same time, when you're watching the show, you don't stop and think about it. It's just effortless and it flows, which is great. But anyway, yeah, the card is interesting. But honestly, I'm even looking at the time and I'm realizing this is a short episode because I don't really have that much to talk about with this. You know, the suspend decks are things that we've seen before. There are other commanders that care about suspend, and you either get effects that are incredibly busted because you're free casting like 10 drops on turn 5 or 6, or they're just way too expensive and you end up just casting stuff just with extra steps, you know? And that's just, so in this case, you know, when you suspend a card off the top, like best case scenario, you hit some huge bomb, you hit an Eldrazi Titan, or you hit one of your big, 8/9, you hit Omniscience or something like that. Okay, great. But like, you have to have gotten a 5-drop down and then attacked with it. Which granted, we're in red, so we have a ton of different ways to give haste. So it could very easily be the turn that the Doctor drops. Also, we're in Commander, so just because it's a 5-drop doesn't mean that it's dropping on turn 5. You're probably going to have a lot of cheap ramp, and I mean, who knows, maybe the Soul Ring shows up, and this is a turn 3 play. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a relatively, not like super consistent, but if it's not uncommon, they'll like drop this and swing with it on turn 3 or 4. Very possible, very doable. So, I don't know, I feel like the card is decent for what it does, and it could be a very fun deck. And actually, it's funny. Okay, here's a little tangent I can I can share with all of you. And I mentioned this actually with the Sliver deck as well, that when we talked about the Sliver Commander. This is a card that is not a competitively good card in my opinion, but as a casual Commander card, I love it. Because it presents a goofy scenario that you can do that can dynamically change the way the board plays and the way the game is played. But, and it does it in a flavorful way in this case, and it can be enjoyable and fun without being oppressive. That's what I want to see in my casual Commander cards. So honestly, I'm not mad at this. You know, if you look at it from a spiky perspective, like, is it good? No. If you're looking at it as a fun casual Commander player who, I want David Tennant to lead my army and cast fun spells for me, this card's got you, and it's going to be really cool. So honestly, that's what these decks need to be, in my opinion. They need to be a fun playground where even people who are newer to Magic can step in and enjoy themselves. And super high-powered Magic is best for the enfranchised, who understand the way stacks interact and understand what certain cards are capable of and how combos interact. Lower power is generally better for newer players. And I think the Doctor Who set is going to potentially, if it's successful, bring in a whole lot of newer players. And that's a beautiful thing. And so making sure the decks are fun and dynamic and capable of big explosive plays without being hyper powerful feels like the right spot. So honestly, I like it. I guess is the bottom line. From a fan, as a fan of the game, I think this card is good for the game. Is it going to be great and competitive? Probably not. But I think a lot of new players, I think somebody is going to free cast a Mind's Desire off of this and have a blast. And that's great. And I want them to have those moments because that's how lifelong fans of the game are made. So I'm excited. Anyway, thanks so much for checking out this edition of the Overthinking MTG podcast. I've been HamHawks42, and presumably will continue to be, unless I rebrand at some point, which, I don't know. So, I've been talking about doing that for years, but it's not actually happening anytime soon, I promise. Anyway, I'll catch you on the next one, everybody.